The fire crackled in the dining hall, throwing shadows across polished silver and crystal glass. Laughter lingered above the long mahogany table, but it was brittle, like glass about to shatter. A goblet tipped, red wine spilling like blood across white linen. Then came the cough, sharp, then another. Forks clattered, a chair scraped back in panic. The air thickened, heavy with smoke, fear, and the copper tang of blood rising in the throat. Outside, cicadas sang as if nothing had changed. Georgia, 1833. They thought supper would end in laughter. Instead, it ended in silence. The fields stretched, for miles, cotton blooming like white ghosts beneath the relentless Georgia sun. Heat pressed down on every back that bent to pick, every hand that bled against thorn and stalk. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and iron. The faint rustle of chains, carried in the breeze like a song of warning. From the big house porch, painted shutters gleamed, a monument to wealth built on bone. "Keep your back low, boy," an old voice rasped. Samuel shuffled forward, his bare feet sinking into the dry soil. His eyes, clouded with cataracts, carried memories of places no one dared to speak of anymore. A silver coin dangled from a string around his neck, his secret talisman, a reminder of freedom once bought and stolen again. Clara, barely 16, hummed softly as she picked beside him. Her lullaby rose above the cicadas, a fragile melody the kind mothers whispered in the dark. Her hands moved quickly, nimble as a bird, but her eyes darted often toward the house. "They watching?" she asked in a whisper. Samuel chuckled, low and bitter. "Always watching, even when you don't see 'em." The sun dipped behind the tree line. Shadows stretched long, and the mansion loomed in silhouette, proud and cruel. Smoke from the kitchen chimney curled skyward, carrying the smell of roasting meat. "Reckon she'll be there tonight," Clara murmured. "Who?" Samuel's voice was a rasp, though his ears caught more than most assumed. "The kitchen girl, the quiet one." "Mary. Heard Martha say she's learning things. Things her mama used to know." Samuel paused, his crooked hands tightening around the cotton stalks. "Herbs?" Clara's lullaby faltered. She looked away, voice low. "Herbs, and more." A bell clanged from the mansion porch, sharp and metallic, cutting through the fields. The overseer's bark followed. "Bring the baskets in, sun's done." The workers stirred, slow and weary. Samuel straightened with a groan, his spine twisted, from decades of bending. He pressed the coin against his lips, a ritual no one else noticed. Clara's song returned, softer this time, carrying sorrow. As the crowd shuffled toward the barn, she whispered, "Sometimes I dream I ain't me, that I'm sitting at that table eating off them plates." Samuel gave a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Careful with them dreams, child. Dreams will either save you or kill you." The mansion door creaked open, spilling golden lamplight onto the porch. From within came laughter, distant yet sharp, like knives clinking. Clara stopped, mid-step, staring. A shadow crossed the window. A woman's figure, tall, proud, clutching something that glinted. Samuel caught her glance and muttered, "Best not look too long. That house got a way of swallowing folks whole." But Clara kept staring, humming, her lullaby under her breath. Her eyes weren't fixed on the house itself, but on the faint outline of a girl moving inside the kitchen, hands busy, head bowed. The quiet one, the scarred one, the one who would change everything. The kitchen was alive with clatter, pots rattling, knives striking wood, the hiss of boiling water. Amid the chaos, Mary moved silently, as if her body had learned to vanish into corners. The scar on her palm, thin, pale, permanent, was the only loud thing about her. It caught the firelight when she reached for ladles, when she scrubbed the wooden table, when she gripped the iron pot handle. "Girl, mind that stew," Martha barked, wiping sweat from her brow. Mary dipped her spoon, tasted, then nodded without a word. Martha frowned. "Always so quiet. You keep all them words locked up. One day they'll rot you from the inside." Mary's lips twitched, but she stayed silent. From the window came the sound of boots striking dirt. Measured, deliberate. A man's shadow darkened the doorway before he entered. Thomas Calhoun, the overseer. His face was carved. In cruelty, eyes sharp from drink, whip coiled at his hip. He reeked of whiskey, sweat, and tobacco. "Kitchen's late again," he growled. His hand gripped the table edge, fingers tapping, 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 a rhythm that made Mary's skin crawl. Martha replied carefully, "Supper's near ready, sir. Won't be a minute more." Thomas leaned closer to Mary. His eyes dropped to the scar on her hand. "That mark, you remember how you got it?" Mary finally spoke, her voice low. "I remember." A smile spread across his face. "Good. A lesson worth keeping." He turned on his heel, boots echoing as he left, the tapping rhythm still in Mary's ears. From upstairs, another sound carried, a woman's sharp voice, dripping with authority. Eleanor Whitfield descended the staircase, skirts brushing the floor like whispers. She held a silver cross against her chest, polished to gleam under candlelight. Her eyes were tired, lined from years of holding her face proud. She stepped into the kitchen, gaze sweeping the servants with disdain disguised as grace. "Everything must be perfect tonight. Judge has guests. If there is even a hint of failure, it reflects on this house, and on me." Her eyes lingered on Mary. "You there, straighten your shoulders, speak when spoken to. God despises sloth." And silence. Mary raised her chin slightly but said nothing. The scar on her hand tightened against the iron pot. Eleanor's lips pressed thin. "Your silence shames you." She turned away, lifting her cross as if in prayer. "Remember, the Lord sees all." When she was gone, Martha muttered under her breath, "The Lord ain't the one watching us. It's her." She jerked her chin toward the stairs where Eleanor had vanished. Mary stirred the pot, the aroma of herbs filling the room. In the steam, she saw her mother's hands, strong, gentle, placing herbs into her tiny palms. A memory whispered through the haze. "What? Heels can also kill. You must know the difference, child." The scar pulsed with heat. Chains rattled in her ears, though no chain bound her wrists. She lowered the spoon, her silence louder than any scream. The nights in Georgia carried their own kind of weight. Crickets droned in the brush. Owls called from the trees. And in the slave quarters, whispers traveled softer than smoke. Mary sat close to the dim light of a tallow candle, fingers brushing across a scrap of paper smuggled from the judge's study. Her lips moved silently, eyes straining to form shapes into words. Beside her, Joseph leaned in, his voice a low murmur. "Slow now. Sound it out." His fingers traced the word with patience. "Freedom." Mary repeated it under her breath, as though the very act of saying it might summon it. Joseph's eyes glimmered in the candlelight. His hands smelled of ink and ash, always marked with smudges from stolen paper. "You got a mind sharper than any blade in that house. Don't waste it." Mary smiled faintly. "If they catch us, they won't." He cut her short, though. His glance toward the door betrayed his fear. "And if they do, let them know knowledge ain't chains they can lock away." The boards creaked outside. Both froze. Then a low whistle. The signal. Isaac's shadow passed by, checking for danger, then vanished again into the night. Mary folded the scrap carefully, slipping it into her apron. Words were her secret weapon, letters her talismans. Inside the mansion, laughter echoed down the hallways. Young Henry Whitfield leaned against the parlor wall, a glass of brandy in his hand, though he was barely 20. His hair was neatly combed, his smile easy, his voice smooth with entitlement. He watched Clara dusting near the hearth, her shoulders stiff beneath his gaze. "You sing, sweet," Henry said, stepping closer. Clara kept her head low. "I wasn't singing, sir." Henry smirked. "Then it must have been the house itself humming when you walked in." He reached to touch her braid. Clara flinched. From the kitchen doorway, Mary watched, her jaw tightening. She said nothing, only stepped forward deliberately with a tray, forcing Henry to step back. The clink of glasses masked the tension in the air. Henry's smile sharpened. "Ah, the quiet one, always staring, never speaking. What's your name again?" Mary's voice was steady. "Mary, sir?" "Mary," he repeated, savoring the word as if it belonged to him. "Maybe one night you'll sing for me too." He winked before strolling away, brandy sloshing. Clara's eyes brimmed, but Mary placed a hand briefly on her arm. No words passed, just a silent bond stronger than any chain. Upstairs, Eleanor Whitfield clutched her silver cross tighter, watching her son from the landing. Her voice cut the silence, sharp as glass. "Henry, enough. Your father would not approve of your indulgences." Henry laughed, bowing mockingly. "Father approves of everything I do. I am the heir, after all." Eleanor's face tightened, but she said no more. She turned away, whispering a prayer, though her eyes betrayed a fear deeper than faith. Later, in the quarters, Joseph handed Mary another page. This one bore a psalm, though the words were dangerous in their own right. She frowned. "Why this?" "Because it speaks of deliverance," Joseph answered. "They think these words are theirs, but they can be ours too." Mary traced the letters, slowly. "Deliverance." Joseph nodded, leaning closer. "One day you'll need it." Their moment was broken by a sudden noise, the heavy stomp of boots. The door swung open. Thomas Calhoun filled the frame, whip dangling like a serpent. His eyes locked on the candle, on the paper. "What's this?" His voice was thick with drink. Mary shoved the page under her skirt, but Joseph stood tall, stepping between them. "Just talking, sir." "Talking, eh?" Thomas sneered. He grabbed Joseph's shirt front, yanking him close. "You think I don't hear whispers? Think I don't see your clever fingers scratching where they don't belong?" Joseph's eyes did not waver. "Words don't break backs." Thomas's whip cracked against the table, splintering wood. "They break necks, boy, remember that." He shoved Joseph aside, sneering as he left. The door slammed and silence pressed down like a weight. Mary's hand trembled as she pulled the folded page from her apron. It was creased, almost torn. But the word remained, deliverance. Clara's lullaby drifted from the corner, soft, trembling. Mary listened, eyes burning with resolve. Chains clinked outside as the overseer's shadow passed by. In that darkness, words became weapons, and silence, her silence, became a shield. The morning sun bled red across the fields, staining the sky like a wound. Workers moved slowly, bent and weary, baskets dragging behind them. The silence was heavy, unnatural, broken only by the low rumble of Thomas Calhoun's voice. "Gather round," he barked, whip coiled in his hand. His breath reeked of whiskey, though the day had barely begun. The slaves hesitated, uneasy. Then they saw why. Joseph stood in the center of the yard, hands bound, shirt torn open. His face was calm, too calm, though his wrists trembled against the rope. Clara whispered, "No." Her lullaby caught in her throat. Mary stood at the edge of the crowd, her scarred hand pressed against her apron. Her heart hammered, but her face betrayed nothing. Thomas strutted before Joseph, savoring the moment. This one thinks himself clever, thinks he can steal, can scheme, can read words that don't belong to him. He spat at Joseph's feet. "Thieves pay in blood." From the balcony above, Eleanor Whitfield appeared, cross clutched in her hands. Her lips moved in silent prayer, though her eyes were sharp with judgment. The crowd parted as Judge Whitfield stepped out. His frame was broad, his beard trimmed, his eyes cold and calculating. In his hand was a glass of brandy, morning sun catching the amber liquid. "Make it quick, Calhoun," the judge said, his voice even, indifferent. "But make it memorable. Order must be maintained." Thomas grinned, cracking the whip in the air. The sound split the morning. Joseph lifted his chin. His voice rang out clear, louder than the cicadas. Don't let them bury me for nothing. The words struck Mary like a blade. Her scar burned. The whip lashed across Joseph's back. He staggered but did not fall. The second strike came harder, ripping flesh. Gasps shuddered through the crowd. Clara buried her face in her hands. Samuel bowed his head, lips moving in silent prayer. By the third lash, Joseph's voice was hoarse, but he forced the words again. Don't let them bury me for nothing. Thomas struck harder, sweat flying, his grin wide. Beg, boy, beg, and maybe I'll spare you another. Joseph's lips split into a bloody smile. I'll never beg. Mary's throat closed. The air smelled of iron and smoke, though no fire burned. Her fingers clenched until her scar throbbed. From the balcony, Judge Whitfield sipped his brandy. Enough. Leave him breathing. Fear is stronger when it lingers. Thomas stepped back, panting. Joseph collapsed to his knees, back shredded, but his eyes still burned with defiance. He turned his head, searching the crowd, and found Mary. Their gazes locked. His whisper was faint but clear. Remember. The guards dragged him away, leaving a trail of blood across the dirt. The workers dispersed slowly, whispers rising like wind through dry grass. Some crossed themselves, others shook their heads. Samuel clutched his coin, muttering, "Storm's coming." Eleanor retreated inside, her cross pressed to her lips. Judge Whitfield turned back to his study, brandy swirling in his glass. Mary did not move. She stared at the dark stain on the ground where Joseph had fallen. The words echoed in her skull. Don't let them bury me for nothing. The cicadas screamed louder. The sun burned hotter. And in the silence of her scarred palm, something inside Mary hardened into iron. Night pressed down heavy, the quarters hushed but restless. Mary sat by the dim glow of the hearth, her scarred hand steady as she crushed dried herbs in a wooden mortar. The bitter scent filled the air, sharp, earthy, with an undertone of sweetness that lingered too long. Martha the cook leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Her hands were dusted with flour, her face worn from years over the fire. I know that smell, she said softly. Mary didn't look up. It heals. Martha stepped closer, her voice low. Aye, it heals. But too much, it kills. Your mama knew that, and so do you. Mary met her gaze finally. She taught me. Martha studied her a long moment, then turned away. Just mind you don't bring ruin on us all. Outside, a horse whinnied. Isaac slipped in quietly, straw clinging to his shirt. He was younger than Mary, wiry and quick, his eyes always darting like a rabbit's. In his hand, he carried a small flask. From the cellar, he whispered, grinning. Judge won't miss it till it's too late. Mary took it, turning it in her hand. You risk too much. I'd risk worse, Isaac said. His smile faded. For you. Their eyes lingered, unspoken words hanging heavy. Then a sound from upstairs froze them, the sharp creak of floorboards. Isaac ducked into the shadows just as Eleanor Whitfield descended, her candle casting long, trembling light. What are you doing here? Eleanor's voice cut the room. Mary held up a basket of bread. Preparing for morning, ma'am. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, lingering on the flask half hidden under the cloth. For a breathless second, Mary thought the game was over, but Eleanor only tightened her grip on the silver cross at her throat. See it done right, she said coldly, turning away. Her footsteps faded into silence. Isaac exhaled from the shadows. Too close. Mary set the flask beside the mortar. Her hand trembled for the first time. The next day, Rebecca appeared in the kitchen, a child of no more than 8, curls bouncing as she clutched a wooden doll. Her laughter was light, pure, out of place in the heavy air. Mary, she chirped, tugging at her skirt. Sing with me. Mary knelt, brushing a curl from Rebecca's face. Not today, little one. Rebecca pouted, then began to hum her own tune, a lullaby. The same one Clara sang in the fields. Mary froze, her scar burning. She forced a smile. Keep that song safe. Don't ever lose it." Rebecca twirled, humming, unaware of the shadow that hung over the house. That night, Mary wrapped the crushed herbs in a small cloth, slipping it into her apron seam. She touched her scar and whispered her mother's words. "What heals can also kill." The house slept, but the air was thick with secrets. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight felt like a warning. Yet Mary moved with purpose, each step bringing her closer to the supper table where everything would end. The dining hall glowed with candlelight, shadows stretching long across the walls. Crystal glasses shimmered, silver cutlery gleamed, and the scent of roasted meat clung to the air. Outside, a storm gathered, thunder grumbling on the horizon. Mary moved silently between the tables, her apron pressed against her scarred hand. Each step felt heavier than the last. In her apron seam, the cloth bundle of crushed herbs waited, hidden and deadly. Judge Whitfield sat at the head of the table, back straight, eyes sharp as a hawk's. To his right, Eleanor perched like a porcelain doll, hands folded over her silver cross. Thomas Calhoun slouched to the left, already on his third glass of brandy, his laughter booming. Beside him, a few plantation overseers joined in, eager to share his mirth. Martha, the cook, moved in and out of the kitchen, her face stern but unreadable. Isaac carried pitchers of wine, his hands steady though his jaw clenched. Rebecca darted between the chairs, humming her lullaby, her doll tucked under her arm. Mary poured wine, her eyes low, her hands careful. The judge's gaze followed her, movements calculating. She could feel it, heavy as chains around her neck. "Mary," Judge Whitfield said suddenly. She froze. "Yes, sir?" "Bring me the pheasant, the one Martha prepared special, and see it carved proper. Tonight is no ordinary meal." Thomas grinned, slamming his hand against the table. "A toast first." He raised his glass, sloshing red wine across the white cloth. "To order, to discipline, to the law that keeps beasts in their place." Laughter roared around him. Eleanor flinched at the vulgarity but said nothing. Mary's scar ached as she laid the roasted bird before the judge. Her hand trembled only once when she sprinkled the herbs into the steaming meat, the scent mingling with garlic and rosemary. Quick, practiced, unseen. She stepped back. The thunder cracked closer. Eleanor crossed herself. "A storm on a night like this, an omen perhaps," Thomas scoffed. "An omen of what? The slaves trembling in their huts?" He carved deep into the pheasant, juices spilling, and shoved the first piece into his mouth. Mary's breath caught. The judge took his portion next, deliberate, slow. He chewed, sipping wine after each bite. His eyes flicked once toward Mary. She lowered her gaze, but her heart pounded like drums. Clara appeared at the doorway, clutching her shawl, whispering to Martha. "Joseph. He's worse. Fever's taken him." Mary's chest tightened. "Joseph's," voice echoed in her skull. "Don't let them bury me for nothing." Inside the hall, conversation swelled. The overseers argued over wages. Thomas laughed until tears streaked his face. Eleanor whispered prayers, her cross pressed so tightly into her palm it left a mark. Rebecca climbed into the judge's lap, giggling, feeding him a piece of bread with her small hands. He smiled faintly, rare softness crossing his face. Mary's scar throbbed. She whispered under her breath, "Forgive me, child." The judge coughed once sharp. The table fell silent. He waved it off, sipping more wine. "Nothing." His voice rasped. He coughed again, harder. Thomas laughed nervously. "Too much brandy, Judge." But then Thomas's laughter died in his throat. His face flushed red, sweat breaking across his brow. He reached for his glass, knocking it over. The overseers muttered, unease spreading like fire. Eleanor's voice rose, panicked. "What's happening?" The judge tried to stand but staggered, gripping the table edge. His glass shattered on the floor, his face twisted with fury as much as pain. "Mary!" he bellowed, spit flying. "What have you—" The words cut short. His chest heaved, his hand clutched his throat. His eyes bulged, veins straining. Thomas gasped, clutching his stomach. He collapsed into his chair, then onto the floor, writhing. The overseers rushed to him, shouting. Eleanor screamed, pulling Rebecca into her arms. "Lord have mercy, what's been done?" Mary stood frozen, her scarred hand pressed against her apron. The room swirled with chaos, shouts, crashing plates, the storm outside roaring into full fury. Martha emerged from the kitchen, face pale. Her eyes found Mary's, and for a brief second, just a second, understanding passed between them. The judge staggered toward Mary, rage in his eyes even as his body failed. "Witch!" he rasped before collapsing to his knees. Wine and blood stained the white tablecloth. Rebecca cried out, clinging to Eleanor. "Grandpapa!" Mary's knees buckled, her chest tight. She whispered again, but the words barely left her lips. "Forgive me." The judge collapsed fully, motionless. Thunder boomed above, rattling the windows. Thomas convulsed once more, then lay still beside the table, brandy pooling near his hand. The overseers shouted in panic, some rushing for water, others for the door. The storm beat against the shutters, wind howling like a chorus of the damned. Eleanor knelt over her husband, sobbing, clutching his lifeless hand. "God have mercy. God have mercy." Mary stood, numb, scar burning, ears filled with the echo of Joseph's voice. "Don't let them bury me for nothing." But as Rebecca's cries cut through the chaos, Mary's eyes filled with tears. She turned away, her face hidden in shadow. The storm swallowed the night. Chains rattled in the distance. The house, once a monument to order and control, had become a tomb, and Mary, scarred and silent, had become its executioner. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the air thick with damp earth and smoke from the hearth. The mansion stood silent, its shutters closed, its hallways echoing with whispers instead of laughter. The grand dining room reeked of spilled wine, sweat, and death. The bodies were gone, carried into the cold parlor, candles burning around them. Judge Whitfield lay stiff, his mouth still twisted in fury. Thomas Calhoun sprawled beside him, skin gray and swollen, brandy stain dark on his shirt. Eleanor sat near the window, rosary beads slipping through her trembling fingers. Rebecca clutched her doll, her small eyes hollow, humming the lullaby her nurse had taught her. Down in the servants' quarters, the whispers spread like wildfire. "It was the food," one voice hissed. "No, the wine," another argued. Martha hushed them, her face stone. "Words carry weight. Watch your tongues." But Samuel spat in the dirt, his cataract eyes burning. "Weight's already carried. Judge is cold. Thomas too. World feels lighter." Isaac stood apart, sharpening a small blade with slow strokes. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "They'll be looking for someone to blame." Mary sat silent in the corner, her scarred hand hidden in her lap. She stared at the floor, hearing Joseph's voice in the back of her mind. "Don't let them bury me for nothing." Clara slipped to her side, her whisper soft. "Mary, it's done." Mary's lips parted, but no words came. In the hall above, overseers argued with raised voices. "They'll say it was poison, then find the one who brought it. And if it was one of them, then we make an example, burn it into the rest so they remember." Eleanor's voice cracked from the parlor. "Enough! My husband lies dead and you bark like dogs." She clutched Rebecca tighter, tears streaking her pale cheeks. "God will punish the guilty. Until then, no one speaks outside these walls." But the walls could not hold the story. By noon, the fields buzzed with rumors. Workers bent low, but their songs carried a new sharpness, their eyes glimmering with dangerous hope. "Judge gone," Samuel whispered to a boy barely 12. "Thomas, too. Chains feel looser already." The boy grinned, whispering the lullaby Clara had sung, now twisted into a chant of defiance. By nightfall, riders came, neighbors, lawmen, the curious. They entered the mansion with wide eyes, staring at the cold bodies lit by candles. "Poison," one muttered. "Witchcraft," said another. Eleanor stiffened. It was God's will, she answered sharply, but her eyes flicked toward Mary, who stood in the shadows, silent, scar gleaming in the lamplight. That night, Isaac found her outside by the well. "They'll come for you." Mary's voice cracked, the first words she'd spoken since the supper. "I did what needed doing." Isaac leaned closer, whisper harsh, "Then hold steady, don't break, 'cause if you fall, they'll bury us all with you." The air smelled of rain and iron. Mary lifted her scarred hand, staring at it as though it belonged to someone else. Chains rattled faintly in the quarters. Rebecca's lullaby drifted from the parlor window, soft and mournful, and somewhere deep inside her chest, Mary felt both the weight of guilt and the sharp spark of freedom. The plantation was no longer the same. The house had become a grave. The people whispered louder, the overseers prowled with suspicion, and the legend of the supper began to take root, carried in lullabies and prayers and the rustle of chains. Mary had crossed a line no one could return from. The question now was, who would survive its shadow? The weeks bled into months, yet the memory of that supper refused to fade. The mansion never regained its brightness. Its shutters stayed closed, its halls muted. The dining room remained locked, the tablecloth burned, though the smell of poison lingered in the wood as if the house itself remembered. In the quarters, whispers grew bold. Children sang Clara's lullaby with new verses. The judge took wine. The judge took bread. Now he sleeps among the dead. Their mothers hushed them, but even as they scolded, pride glimmered in their eyes. Samuel, old and nearly blind, became the keeper of the tale. He sat by the fire, silver coins swinging at his chest, retelling the night with more color each time. She walked with fire in her veins, he told the young ones. Silent, scarred, but her hand carried the weight of every chain we bear. Others changed the story. Some said Mary had struck a deal with the devil, the scar on her hand proof of his mark. Others claimed Joseph's spirit had risen through her, guiding her to finish what he could not. A few whispered she had poisoned not 2, but 6, and that only God's mercy kept Eleanor and Rebecca alive. Outside the plantation, rumors spread like wildfire. Neighbors spoke of witchcraft. Newspapers carried short lines about a suspicious illness claiming a prominent judge and his guest. In taverns, men lowered their voices, speaking of how quickly power could fall. For the enslaved, it was different. In the still of night, by flickering lamplight, Mary's name became a prayer. They spoke it with reverence, with fear, with hope. She didn't beg. She didn't run. She did what none dared. But Mary herself shrank deeper into shadow. She worked quietly in the kitchen, eyes lowered, her scar hidden in her apron folds. She answered little, spoke less, though at times, in the still, hours. Isaac caught her staring into the fire, lips moving as if whispering to ghosts. Eleanor clung to her rosary, telling visitors it had been sickness, nothing more. Yet in private, her hands shook when Mary passed near. She locked Rebecca's bedroom door at night, though the child often sang through it, her lullaby soft and haunting. Years later, when the war came and the world turned upside down, the story of Mary of Georgia resurfaced. Soldiers whispered of a slave woman who had brought down a judge and a cruel overseer with nothing but a handful of herbs. Preachers thundered against her name, calling her a Jezebel, a witch. Ballads twisted her tale, turning her into a specter haunting the fields, scar glowing in the moonlight, poison dripping from her hands. And yet, for those who still bore chains, she was no ghost. She was a symbol. Children grew up hearing her name before they knew the names of presidents. Women whispered her story in birthing rooms, telling their daughters, strength comes in silence. Men sang her name as they swung axes, as if her courage flowed through their blood. Mary, the quiet one. Mary, the scarred one. Mary, who poisoned the supper table and broke the spell of fear. She had lived a life of whispers, but in death, or perhaps in legend, her voice roared louder than the judge's gavel, louder than Thomas Calhoun's laughter. louder than the chains that rattled in the dark. The story changed with every tongue that carried it, but one thing never shifted. The supper had become legend, and Mary had become something more than flesh. A reminder, a warning, a fire that refused to go out. History is not kind to the quiet ones. Their names are buried in ledgers, their voices lost in dust. But sometimes when silence breaks, the sound echoes for centuries. Mary of Georgia was never meant to be remembered. She was meant to carry trays, clean floors, and die nameless. Yet her scarred hand carved itself into history, not with ink or gavel, but with poison stirred into a supper bowl. What was it? Justice or vengeance? A cry for freedom or the curse of despair? The answer shifts depending on who tells the tale. To the oppressors, she was a witch, a criminal. To the enslaved, she was a spark, proof that even chains could not hold back the will to strike. Her act was not noble. It was not pure. It was blood and fire, guilt and survival. But rebellion is rarely clean. It rises from hunger, grief, humiliation. It rises from watching a child beaten, from holding a dying man who whispers, "Don't let them bury me for nothing." Mary's legacy is not just the fall of a judge and his cruel guest. It is the lesson that power can be broken, that even the mightiest table can be overturned by the hand of the forgotten. Chains may rattle for generations, but every chain carries the memory of someone who dared to break it. And so Mary lingers, in lullabies, in whispered prayers, in the uneasy silence of a supper table. She did not beg. She did not run. She chose to burn it all down. The candles are out now. The dining hall is silent. The storm has passed, but the question remains, and it is not history's alone, it belongs to you. Mary's scarred hand hovered over the supper table, and in that moment she made a choice. Not to forgive, not to wait, but to strike. Some will call it murder. Others will call it justice. Perhaps it was both. If you were there, if it was your family starving, your friend dying in chains, your child trembling under the lash, what would you have done? Would you keep your head low, waiting for mercy that never comes? Or would you risk everything, even your soul, to poison the feast? History doesn't give us easy answers. It only leaves us with echoes. The rattle of chains, the sting of smoke, the silence after the last breath. So I leave you with the question, if you were in Mary's place, would you forgive or burn it all down? If this story haunts you, if it makes you question justice, power, and rebellion, then don't let it die. Here, share it, speak it, keep the memory alive, subscribe, like. Join us again where history bleeds into legend. This is the slave resistance. Until the next story, remember, the past never sleeps.